Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me once again on this episode of the Remarkable Coach podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pacheco. Today with me, I have Christie Garcia. Christie is a leadership coach and the founder at Mindful Choice Leadership Academy. She works with individuals and organizations to help them manage their egos while maximizing their leadership impact with confidence and integrity. Christie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Michael. I'm so excited to visit with you today.
I remember we had a great conversation on the other podcast, Coffee with Coaches, so I'm excited about this as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we just open up with, how about you just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of a little bit about what you do?
Well, that's a big, broad question. So about myself, I am a leadership development coach. I've been in this industry for the last 10 years, 10 plus, I guess. I am, my niche is ego management. So my background is in sales, recruiting, and kind of communication skills. And so naturally that led me to building a program around egos. And really that's the fun part about my business. So I actually live out in small town America, which is great. I used to live in the big cities, and it's given me the space to really build and create this platform that's allowed me to transform not only my world and really live what I practice or what I preach, I guess, but to make sure that I'm helping others find that balance in their world and be more successful in their business and really just get to maximize their impact at home and within their organizations as leaders, as managers, as business owners. The world's crazy right now. So slowing down and getting in control of our thoughts and mind is really the next chapter, I think, for humans to really maximize our success.
That's great. Tell us a little bit more about ego management. What does that phrase mean, and what does that look like?
Ego management. Yeah, it's a token phrase that I kind of started using a few years ago, somewhat as a joke, and then it kind of just stuck, to be honest. So the programs that I've built, the Leadership Academy, is all around three different egos. You've got the complier, the protector, and the controller. And these egos really run our show. It's the unconscious brain, our behaviors, our mindsets, our beliefs that we're not even aware of. It happens every single moment of every single day, and we all have them. And so what I like to do is normalize these egos, bring awareness around them so everybody can wake up and recognize, okay, what's my part of the situation and what's the other people's parts. And being able to separate the two really gives people power to make choices, power to change their language, to just show up differently, whether it's in their marriage or whether it's with their team or in a boardroom. When we are aware of this ego that truly impacts how we communicate, how our body language shows up, how we translate and perceive things, now we can actually shift and change gears. And so part of that, I always use the theme of Leadership Academy is, if you don't learn to control your mind, someone or something else will. And really what that means is the ego is going to run your show if you don't learn to control it. It is your unconscious mind. And so by controlling and managing that ego, you will learn to control and manage your life, which is amazing and powerful for each individual to step into.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned three different egos: complier, protector, and controller. Is that right?
Correct.
What is the difference between those three? Tell us about the three different egos. Yeah.
Yeah. The egos are so fun. One, because we can all relate to all of them. The ultimate goal is to in order to be your best self, you have to learn to use all three at the magic number around 33%, and that number is really there just because our strengths are a weakness. So anytime we're using a strength, if we overuse it, it can hold us back, right? For example, an overused strength of, let's see, confidence. Confidence is great. We all need it, right? If we overuse it, it can turn into arrogance. It can turn into unrelatability. It can turn into something that is not easily relatable in most situations, or it's a turnoff, right? And so knowing when you're overusing that strength, a lot of times it comes through these insecurities. And that's really where these egos play, how they play on us is through these insecurities that we have. So the complier tends to be your warm, inviting person, friendly, caring, compassionate. They are the people who can walk in the room with no friends and walk out with 10. They're the ones that we all are attracted to because of their kindness and their natural warmth that they bring to any situation. Now,
would you say this is like a people pleaser, or is there a difference of delineation between?
Yes. So when those strengths are overused, it can turn into going along to get along.
Okay.
Turning into saying yes when you want to say no, doing the things you don't want to do. Now, people pleasing isn't always bad, right? There's a level of people pleasing that's important and we need to do it. There's a strength there, but knowing, when does that turn over? And so that's the complier tends to go passive, not speak their truth, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So their motivator is they must be liked. The protector is almost the grounding force for all of us. It is the one that's solid in our beliefs, our values. It believes in what's right and wrong. It does what's fair for everyone when it's in its best place. Now, unfortunately, the extremes of that actually, so another part of the protector is that cool, calm, and collected under pressure. So they're the people we want on stranded islands. They have the ability to shut off emotion and look logically and rationally in times of really high stress and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is all of those grounded qualities can be overused. And now you have very extreme black and white, right, wrong. You're either in or you're out. And so that makes them very stubborn. They can also be very difficult to work with and non-emotional, unrelatable, or they can be the other where they're so high emotion and high energy that it becomes chaotic and stressful, or, the confidence lies in this one as well. So they can come across as very arrogant or very passive and quiet and kind of look down on people. And so it's knowing that balance as well. Where the protector is really the strength in all of us is being able to speak our truth, being able to know how to create boundaries, being able to say no in order to protect ourselves, where there's an extreme of that, but that's really the balance that it helps the complier do, to be able to balance out some of their wavering thoughts, right? The part of them that they can't commit or they can't face conflict, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got the controller. So the protector must be right. That's kind of their motivator to find worth and value. The controller, on the other hand, is the one that needs to be the best and win. So they're your very
competitive types,
results-oriented, competitive. Anybody who's in a leadership role has some form of controller in them, just because you wouldn't be successful without it. It's the ongoing learning and a lot of passion and drive. They really motivate and inspire people. They also have this kind of confidence that they just exude out of them, and they have this contagious energy. Now, unfortunately, what happens with them is they get really hyper rational and non-emotional. And so it's task first, people second, which makes them sometimes difficult to relate to, or they'll micromanage. They have to control things in order to feel in control. And so it kind of go down that circle of they'll end up at the finish line first, but a lot of times they'll be there by themselves. And so learning how to balance that out to make sure they recognize the value of the people, learn to change their language, and to find that space to where they, are more successful as a leader in that space.
Interesting. It almost sounds like you're talking about like personality archetypes almost. Is there, like, where do you draw the line between like ego and personality, or is it kind of the same thing in this context?
It is and it's not. It's a little more complicated than just personalities. And the reason for is because the ego can be manipulated, right? It's the ego was designed from childhood. It's around age 2, we can start watching it happen in our children. And really that comes back to just life circumstances. It was once they're designed to protect us. And now it's turned into this thing that starts to hold you back. And the reason it protected us at one time and it actually served us, and why we call it both our strength and our weakness, is that up until about, 20, you're an individual. We're taught to get good grades in school, make the team, the school sports team, make the cheerleading team, or to get really good grades and get on whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? But it's always an individual. I must win. I must be liked. I must be right in order to be successful. And so that actually served us at one point. Once we start to get into adulthood, the I part becomes selfish and it holds us back because now it's more about the we, right? Whether you're talking in a marriage, friendships, on a team, or within an organization, becoming a business owner, you have to learn to shift to the we. Now we all must be liked. We all must be right. And we all must win, or we are at the finish line by ourselves. And that means our teams, our families, our communities, our friendships are failing. Mm-hmm. And it's just because if you're there by yourself, it doesn't matter, right? Nothing else is going to be there with you. And so learning to shift that perspective. So it's more of the mindsets, beliefs, and behaviors that wrap up in the personality. But these personalities fall into the egos. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing is think of the egos as the unconscious brain that then creates those personalities, creates those characteristics, which then can be chosen to, you can choose to change them or to modify them to be in your service.
Yeah. So I'll use myself as the guinea pig example here, as I frequently do in this podcast.
I love it.
I am working through some of my own personal stories right now, as a matter of fact. And my coach has told me that my ego is protecting me from, protecting me from my, deeply held beliefs and stories that are buried deep down within. And part of my exercising to get into that and kind of through that is to journal on some difficult questions, ask why, a number of times, to dig in there. Is the ego in that context part of what you work with as well? Is that literally the protector that I'm talking about?
The ego is in all of them. So it could be the protector, but there's beliefs that she's helping you get to the beliefs and mindsets of why you do what you do, right? So what's really deep down in there, which falls into controller, complier, and protector. Where you find more of which ego you fall under is once you get into the why. What is the real motivator around whatever you're protecting yourself from? Now, we all have some level of protection, right? But for example, let's just take child heartbreak, right? We have our first crush, we get our heart broken. And from then on out, it's like, no more dating. Done. Well, that depends on which ego you are of how that goes off. Usually a protector ego is the one that's like dead to me. Like, I will no longer, I'm either in it or I'm out of it. I'm either going to fall in love or I'll never fall in love again. And so that's where those extreme beliefs come into play. And that deeper why is, if I fall in love, I get hurt. I have no control. I, need to have boundaries. So it's either all in or all out. So that might be where, when you get into those beliefs, there is the protector underneath there. There also, for the complier, that might look like, well, I just need to be more of it was my fault. So I need to go along more. I just need to do more of what they liked or want to do and more of what they need me to do. Maybe I just wasn't right for them because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And so they kind of become the victim to that relationship. And so they start to comply more within the relationships they fall into. So that's their way of protecting from heartbreak in the future, right? Just like me. I'll do whatever you want.
Sure.
And then you've got the controllers who typically they're the pretty unemotional as well, but removed. So they go to the hyper-rational. Well, it just wasn't right. So I'm going to move on. I'll keep myself really busy and I won't have to think about it anymore. And then they'll get into relationships that typically have very strict boundaries. They share what they want to share, but they don't share anything beyond that. And it's really hard to get into that emotional relationship with a controller. They can be in a good relationship and it can be fun and it can be exciting and it can even be meaningful, but you're not having those deep meaningful connection conversations. It's pretty surface level. So that's how
you're always in control.
Exactly. You control it versus someone else.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. And and it sounds like, well, I'm going to assume that like none of us are 100% controller, right? There's always, there's a blend of everything, and probably at different times we take on different aspects of it.
Absolutely. So really the ego, we usually have 1 to 2 dominant ones. Sometimes, the older we get, the more advanced we get, the more work we do, we tend to use more of all 3. Again, the goal is to use all three. So a lot of times through life, we'll learn to, oh, well, wait, if I control too much in this situation, then I upset this group. So in order to get to the end result, I should probably make sure I pull this group along, right? And so we kind of learn to adapt and pull from each ego. Now, not always, but we typically have those 1 to 2 dominant ones. And so like I am a controller protector. And so my go-to is control first, protect second. And so it's kind of this dance where if I manage the controller ego, but I'm not aware of the protector ego, then the protector will sneak in and kind of take over and sabotage. And that's kind of what it does, is where you really have to learn both to then be able to see the signs and the feeling of both of them, because there's visceral signs when the ego comes in. That's really what the academy is about. The first, 5 weeks is all about self-awareness. What's it look like? What's it feel like? How does it show up? What's it do to your breathing? What does it do to your ears? Like for me, my chest tightens up. I get a lump in my throat. My ears get warm. And then I start to breathe really fast. Right. And so I know my controller's kicking in and I need to slow down. And so being able to learn that about yourself is huge, because then you can go to that clear, conscious thought to say, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why does this matter to me? Why does it matter to everyone else? And the further you get it away from yourself, the more clear and productive your next move will be. And so that's really the thing is, when we learn to manage our egos, we manage the drama of our life. We get to remove it. The egos feed on drama. And as soon as there's one ego in the room, another one's going to follow. And now you've got drama, where if one person can manage the ego in a room, you can actually start to manage all the egos in the room. And now you're having a productive conversation again. And that's the fun of this work, is you start to really learn how to shift and change everyone into a powerful place.
I love that. Because I've seen it work before, where I've felt triggered at my own company's meetings. And if I can gather myself and just set that ego aside and focus on the team's needs and not my needs, everything works out great. And I can't always do that, but when I'm able to do it.
Right. And that's the thing, is no one's perfect. I always tell people, when people start this work, like, okay, just tell me how to fix it. What do I need to do to be better? And it's like, well, this is a lifelong journey. The ego doesn't ever go away. It is your unconscious mind. So as long as you stay present and you learn about it, then you're good. Right. But 95% of the time we are unconsciously going through the motions. That is matter of fact. So, if you aren't shifting and practicing these mindful tips to stay present every moment of every day, you'll never get to that place where you just absolutely manage your ego all the time. Now, it's unrealistic to think that you're going to be able to manage your ego all the time. I've been doing this work for 10 years and I still have to manage my own ego, and it often gets the best of me. Ask my husband. So I think it's one of those things where recognizing part of it's owning your good, bad, and ugly. A lot of times what the ego does is it wants to tell you you're bad for being a jerk, or you're bad for not knowing how to do something better, or you're bad for not speaking up, or you're bad for doing this or that, or whatever it is. And it's like, no, you're human. You're human. And being able to just accept that sometimes you aren't going to be perfect. And sometimes that's the biggest lesson. We call it failing brilliantly here at Mindful Choice. We encourage it, celebrate the wins and fail brilliantly. Sometimes that's the biggest win of the day, is when you fail. Because if you're not failing brilliantly and celebrating that, you're not encouraging others to take risks. You're not encouraging others to innovate. You're not encouraging others to bring the ideas to the table or to show up. You're encouraging people to play it safe. Don't take risks. Do the status quo, be mediocre, because then you can't rock the boat. You can't screw things up, and you just go along to get along, right? Like that is what we're breeding in society right now so much. I will honestly say there's been more complier. I have an assessment tool, and there's been so many compliers coming through my system lately. And I truly believe that we are breeding and creating a complying society. Just do what you're told. Don't ask questions. Don't, change it. Don't challenge it. You just do what you're told. And it's such a scary place, because that's such an ego-driven motive.
Yeah. It's almost, I would argue that that's even taught in schools, right? It's
absolutely
failure's bad. You want to get A's, an F stands for failure, and that's a bad thing.
Right.
That's interesting. Where does guilt play into this conversation at all, especially in terms of of, when you maybe miss an opportunity to manage your ego and you feel guilty and you're beating yourself up about it and your internal dialogue is awful. How does that play into this conversation?
Absolutely. So guilt is a big one. The 10 easiest ways, and I won't list all 10, but the, easy signs to show that the ego is at play: guilt, judgment, critiquing, criticism, blaming, and, pointing the finger at someone else, comparing yourself to someone else, not being good enough, all those things. Those are ego tactics. So if you or someone else is doing that, your ego is at play. If you're gossiping, if you're talking about someone else, if you're, rallying the troops for someone else to step in and go make the change that you're too scared to make the change about, all of that is part of the ego's tactic to create drama, to prevent change, and to really create misery. It likes to create a martyr and a victim in every situation. And so you're either going to fall into martyr or victim. You either make yourself a martyr or a victim. And when you're the victim, you have no choice, right? You feel like you are powerless and you've given all that power away, and you say nothing can change. It's not my fault. If my boss just wasn't a jerk, or if, my husband wasn't this, or if my kids did that, or whatever, right? If my teams just would do a better job, there's always an excuse when we're in that ego mindset. Or it's the martyr side. Now it's, no one's as good as me, so I might as well just do it myself. No one could do it this way, so I should just, take charge of it. So yeah, it's knowing when are you pushing your own stuff on everybody and making everybody else wrong except for yourself. That is the easiest way to identify that the ego is present, because it's so much easier to blame someone else for our problems than to sit back and say, what's my part? We all play a part, whether it's 1%, 45%, or 99% of every single situation that's going on in the world around us. What's our part? If you're not taking ownership of one bit of it, you're probably, or could be, the biggest issue that's going on in the situation to begin with.
Interesting. So that kind of, you just gave us an idea of how to help with awareness and catching that little bugger when he's
yes,
getting in the way. What walk us through like without giving the game away, walk us through a little bit of what your coaching looks like. What happens next after you become aware and you're able to identify that there's an issue? What next?
So the biggest thing is, once you start to recognize the ego, we start to talk about how to manage it. By just being self-aware, you're naturally going to manage it differently, right? Sure. A lot of times we will, when we start this work, it's like, well, what do I do with it? I know I'm being a jerk, but I don't know how to do it a different way. And so in that moment, it's getting curious. So you first get present, and then you get curious. The easiest way to get present is to stop and breathe. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And the reason I always say out through your mouth is because your head is connected to a breath that's really shallow, and the ego breathes shallow. And so a lot of times people just breathe through their nose, and and you almost create this anxiety attack, right? It's like quick breaths. And a lot of people don't know how to, especially you protectors out there, you've never taken a deep breath. And so truly learning to breathe. When you breathe out of your mouth, you actually feel relaxation in your chest. If you're not feeling the relaxation in your chest, then you are not breathing fully. When you start to relax your chest, you now have this constant flow of head and heart talking, which allows you to have a thorough conversation and thought process. Ego hates curiosity and it hates truth, and it does not like facts, right? And so the more clear you can get and more present you get and start asking questions, now it has to actually stop and think. And so, why does this matter to me? Why am I so upset? That's the number one question to ask, because then you can get into that core root of which ego is actually being triggered right now. Am I looking to be liked? Am I looking to be right? Am I looking to be the best? Do I feel like someone stepped on my, respect value? Do I feel underappreciated? What's the real issue here? Then once we get there, why does it matter to the other person? Because you have to remember they have an ego too. So what is being stepped on for them? What are they questioning? Why are they getting defensive? And then you go to something even bigger. Why does it matter to the business, to the clients, to the community, to my family? The further away from you get it from yourself, the less the ego can be involved. Because again, remember, the ego is selfish. It wants to win for you. It wants to do what's right for you. And so when we start to pull away from me, I must win, I must be right, I must be liked, and start looking at the we, it makes it much easier to reduce that emotion around it and start to really see it in a very logical, rational way and have new choices. So you should always have choices involved. Once you recognize what is involved in the feelings and the curiosities, then you go to, okay, what are our options? The ego likes to focus on the problem. So fix the problem as quickly as possible. Most likely someone else is the problem, so you have to fix them, which is a really hard thing to fix. So then you have to go to outcomes. So if you focus on the outcome, it's a much easier conversation to be had. You can align people around the outcome and the long-term vision. So once you get them aligned around the outcome, now you can have a conversation. It's higher level. Everybody's bought in. So how do we get there now? If we start to get stuck on problems or the hows, again, the egos are coming back in place. So go back to the outcome. And an easy way to stay out of the drama is to remember there has to be at least 5 to 7 options at all times. If you've got 2 options, you've got ego. Even 3, sometimes it's an ego thing. You're trapped. You're either in this or that, right? You have to either do it this way or that way. It's my way or your way. That's ego. When you have 7 options, they may not be good options, but there's 7 options. And that gives you choice, and choice gives you power. And so being able to feel like you are in control and have power to make a choice allows your best self to show up. The ego wants to trap you, which then brings your worst self out. And so keeping choices prevalent is huge, or present, I should say. And so staying focused on outcome and remembering options are power. And I think if you can stay there, that's going to be the easiest route for you. But getting to that place is probably, I would say, phase 2 of the academy. Really, self-awareness and ownership, and then going to this place of curiosity and choices and communicating through that in a non-emotional way is where people can really shift and start to manage the ego successfully.
How do you coach people who feel hemmed in as though they only have, 1 or 2 or 3 choices? 5 to 7 different choices feels, well, let me say this, speaking from a business owner's perspective, 5 to 7 choices feels like a lot to me.
It's hard. Absolutely.
So how would you coach someone who feels a little bit more hemmed in than that?
Well, I think, when we're talking, there's a lot of ego talk, right? And so we've already discussed the egos. We're talking about the egos. Even just last week, I was talking to business partners, and a lot of times business partners will find themselves in that trap of, we have 2 options, either my way or your way, and we've got to pick one. And so it causes a lot of conflict, right? Or marriages or whatever. Sure. And so being able to get them back to, all right, guys, we've got 2 options here. What does that mean? Eventually everybody recognizes, oh, we're still an ego. But when they don't recognize it, it's like, give me more options. Let's play the, what if anything is possible game. And this goes back to collaboration and, sharing ideas and building on the options. What happens is the ego doesn't like to collaborate. It doesn't like options. So it makes us think there's only 2, right? And so when you give people permission to be creative, give me every idea, right? Let's say we want to give a raffle away to the senior class. Let's give a free Ferrari. That's ridiculous. But why couldn't it be an option, right? It's an option. And so when we even put out ridiculous options, it starts to get our brain thinking, it's like, ooh, we might not be able to get a Ferrari away, but why couldn't we get a brand new bike away? Or, and so now we've got 2 options, where before it was just like a gift card to pizza parlor or go to a movie theater, right? Like whatever. And so recognize no, now we've got more options. And now you start getting creativity. Once you get past the 2 to 3 options, you actually start to see options easier because your best self is in the picture, and people love to create. People love to dance with ideas. But if we're in that ego, it's really hard to get there. So most people typically are in a 1 to 2 option trap. So it's like, well, this is my only option. I can't do anything differently than this because this is what the rules are telling me. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well,
you almost have
to sometimes be broken, right?
You almost have to recognize that there's gray area.
Gray is our favorite color. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Gray is our favorite color because at the end of the day, the ego wants to see black and white. It's either my way or that way. It's either this or it's that.
Interesting.
Got to get into gray. Yeah.
I want to circle back to something you said before about how the ego has difficulty kind of staying attached to external problems.
Uh-huh.
How do you get there? How do you baby step your way from me, focused on the self, ugh, my situation is so awful, to whatever the external problem looks like?
First is getting people present. When people are unconscious, our problem seems so massive. It seems like no one can relate to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the more present we get, the more aware we become of what's really going on, we start to realize that everybody's story is exactly the same. Different characters, different topics, maybe different problems today, but they were probably our problems last week. And so recognizing that, we're not on this island on our own. The only one that makes us on an island by ourselves is our ego. The only one that puts us on these islands is ourself, and it's sabotaging. And so one, getting them into that present mindset of recognizing, okay, you're in this place. Luckily, by the time, I shouldn't say that actually, some people are just thrown into the academy through their employer. And so you've got to really kind of break it down to them. But first and foremost, we teach confidence. So one of the first tools we give is a very specific tool that shows your best self. Once you know your best self, now you can recognize when you're not your best self. And then the next tool is, what's your sucky self look like? And not just sucky high level, but like the worst of the worst when you are disgraceful. And we all can be, right? And so getting really honest with yourself, it's hard. And this work is not easy, but when you do it, it's freeing and it's empowering. And so once we know that, now you've got the confidence to actually sit back and say, okay, so now that I know I'm not being my best self, which word is missing? A lot of times empathy is not available when the ego's around, right? And so maybe we need to stop and empathize with the other person for a minute instead of putting it in making it about ourselves, right? And a lot of times what we'll do is we judge something. Just the other day, this happened just last week to me. I was supposed to do an interview with a gentleman, and it's live. So I posted everywhere. So all these people are watching, and so I'm like, okay, we're 15 minutes in. I still haven't heard anything. This is so weird, And so in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I hope he didn't die in a car accident or someone else died. Like, this is horrible. People don't just stand you up, right? Especially on a live show. And, you could just see clients and family members like, he stood you up, what a jerk, blah, blah, blah. And it was just so funny to see the egos coming out, right? They wanted to protect me, and how could he? But that's how our ego does it. It's either we go into over empathizing with someone and we make all the excuses in the world for them, or we go into complete rage and just make them bad in order to protect ourselves. And so knowing like, okay, both of those are probably extreme, and being able to just go down that middle road is, what is the real story here? Look for facts.
What's the gray color in there?
Yes. Stop assuming. Assuming is your enemy. Assumptions are what ruins every relationship, every conversation. Perceptions ruin every conversation, every relationship. And so learning what those assumptions and perceptions are that we make help create so much more clarity when we are in those situations. And so a lot of times we start with that word, confidence. And then what are the assumptions that your go-to assumptions? Because I guarantee there's patterns in them. I guarantee no matter what you do, no matter what situation you run into, you're probably dealing with the same 5 assumptions or perceptions for every single one of them. And it's protecting you and not someone else.
Yeah. Interesting. I like that. I can see that kind of mirrored in just everyday social media interactions, especially.
Social media, I think, is the death to humanity. It's horrible.
It's like a magnifying glass for the ego. It's awful.
It really is. I think that's it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about getting this work out right now. I think our world it's being manipulated by our egos right now, because we've gotten so smart around psyches and human motivators. Using it in our marketing, we're using it in social media, and we're actually using it in our politics. It's really gross. It's really, really gross. And so everything is emotion driven. Our
Yep.
ego is emotion driven. It is not rational. It doesn't think straight. And so the more we can trigger emotion, the less rational and logical we are as humans. And this is what we're seeing, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's our presidents, whether it's, our healthcare system or putting kids back to school. It doesn't matter what it is. Like this is how we're fueling people's fire. And you're seeing it on social media, just in people's everyday conversations. And it's really, really dysfunctional, and it's very unhealthy because, again, if there's one ego in the room, you have multiple egos in the room. So when you have a whole culture that's built around triggering people's emotional responses, that's just egos running our show and using everybody as a puppet. And we're following suit, which goes back to that whole complier thing. There's more compliers in the world today than ever before because we're just these little puppets that are reacting to the sophisticated AI stuff and the sophisticated marketing strategies. And, it's just so interesting how it's happening.
It's definitely dysfunctional, but I love that you called it gross. That gives me a little giggle, and I think it's 100% spot on. The Machiavellian manipulation, and I say this as a professional marketer. Use to the other marketers out there watching this, use your powers for good.
Yes. Do not use evil. And that's actually one of the hardest things marketing this program right now is, every marketer that I was initially working with wanted to go to that immediate, like, what's the evils? Like, what's that real deep, angry thing you're fixing? And it's like, ew, I don't want to even talk about that. Like, I get we have to go to a level of that, but how yucky they're wanting to go and how deep into that. It's like, I don't want to add more salt to the wound. Actually, I don't want to talk their ego. I want to talk to their best self because their ego is never going to sign up for this program. So, our marketing is all about calling out the ego and saying, hey, you want something better than this? You want to actually show up and be present in your life and change your relationships and be more successful, because the ego doesn't want any of that. The ego says, I'm doing great. I don't need that work. Everybody else around me has an ego. And so it's like making sure that we're focused really in on the good of this work. It's hopefully what's going to help shift.
Yeah, that's
cultures.
Great. You mentioned a few minutes ago that the work is very difficult to do. The like ego work is very difficult to do. How do you work with someone who is struggling with the work?
That's a really good question. And, when I say the work is difficult, it's difficult because it takes conscious effort, right? Our status quo is to unconsciously go through the motions of life.
Yep.
And so the hard part isn't that it takes a lot of time. It isn't that it takes a lot of effort, but it takes conscious choice. And that's the hardest part, because now you have this unconscious brain that's been working against you your entire life, telling you to work longer hours, to do more of this, to do more of that. And now you're wanting to change that thing's story. And that thing has a tight grip on us. So it's really, that's the hardest part, is to realize that you have to get smarter than the unconscious brain so that your conscious, intentional brain can step in and say, whoa. This is actually the life I want to live. This is actually the choices that I want to do. You might be living a great life today, but my question is, how intentional are you being? Because that's usually when people start to realize, like, oh, well, I think I'm being intentional. It's like, are you being so intentional that I can ask why you did what you did 5 minutes ago and you would know how? Or would you just say, I did what I did because that's what I was supposed to do? Or that's just what I do. I was like, that's the common thing I hear. Well, I just do it because that's what I'm supposed to do, or that was the right thing to do, or that was the easiest way to do it, or the best way to do it. Yeah. Well, but why? Why? Once you can start asking yourself why, now you're becoming conscious. Now you're becoming more intentional, because there might be a reason of why you should be doing it a different way, or maybe you're doing it the right way, but there's even a better way than that. And you can give an even more impactful approach to the people you're coaching, training, or developing, or, you get to make a stronger impact because you took it one step further, because now you're intentional. And I think that's the power of this work for sure.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you have many people who have the intention to sign up for the academy, and then once they get in there, maybe they procrastinate, maybe they, sit down to do the work with a journal or whatever, or worksheet, whatever, however you do it, and then they just, nothing comes out? What are some common blocks that you see, and how do you work with those to help people get around those blocks?
So I love you're asking this question for so many reasons. One, I think there's so many coaching programs out there. How many people have bought a program and never even logged in, right? Millions. I have at least 50 of them. Yeah. One was, I used to say, I'm doing it for research. But then I never even logged in. Yeah. So, it's one of those things that we all want to improve. We all want to grow. We all want to change. It's kind of like going to the gym. How many people buy gym memberships every January, and then come March, they still have never been to the gym? The ego plays a role in all of those things. The ego doesn't like self-care. The ego doesn't like good health. The ego doesn't like strong opinions. The ego doesn't like being able to choose and have power, because then it can't make you miserable, right? It can't sabotage your good intentions. If you're making all good choices, then what's it going to take advantage of? And so it keeps you in this mindset that you're too busy. That's too expensive. I don't have enough time. And so you never do those things that just make you healthy. And what we are learning is that the healthy mind makes you a better leader, makes you a better boss, makes you a better spouse, a better friend, a better parent, better community member, right? So why wouldn't we do those things? Because of this ego, because of that unconscious brain. And so when I designed this program, I designed it for someone like myself, the epitome of the person who hates to sit down in front of a computer and watch a video. I hate it. It is not for me. And it's because I'm too busy. It's that controller mind that's always got something else to do. So even if I'll have it on, it's totally in the background. I'm multitasking and I don't listen to it really. And so with that in mind, I created this program. One of the things that I do throughout the program, whether it's live or whether it's in this digital platform, it's about managing your ego so you can digest this information. And these videos are bite size, so 5 to 12 minutes long, and they call out your ego so that I'm talking to your best self the entire time. If you choose to show up and you choose to truly watch the video, I will guarantee that every single person will walk away with at least one tip to do something better than they would have before the conversation. And that's my goal. It's designed very coachy. So it's very personal. I'm, with them the entire way. But the real value is my goal to make sure everybody walks away and is able to be at least 1% better than they were before that initial interaction. And every single moment of the video has that goal in mind. And I think everybody who's gone through it has been able to say, wow, this is different. It feels different, but it's mostly because I'm talking to their ego, and no one ever does that. People preach and give you tools and resources. They don't manage your ego so you can hear those tools and resources. And that's the trick. That's why this work is so awesome. I tell every coach out there, if you're coaching something or organizations, if you're teaching them a new skill, you have to manage their ego first. If you're not managing their ego, you're just preaching to them. It's like telling a kid to go learn to tie their shoes and you're wanting to fight them along the way. It's like, no, the kid's ego's in place. Like, he's not going to listen to you. He's going to do it himself, right? It's like the 4-year-old that says, no, I'm going to do it. It's like parents are fighting them. No, just get dressed. Let me help you. And it's this battle, right? Once someone just says, okay, you do it, and then I'll help you when you're done. Like, now you just probably took 5 minutes off that interaction because you're not yelling at each other in that moment. And so that's the thing, is helping manage the ego so people can learn, grow, develop, do the things they say they want to do, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's losing weight, whether it's delegating, buying yourself more time because you're so busy because no one's good enough to take over the tasks you're responsible for. That's all ego tactic.
Show that D stands for delegate, and then 80-20.
Get it off your list. Yes.
I keep that right here on my laptop. 24 hours
awesome.
a day, 7 days a week. I've had it there for the last year or so, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yes, I'm a big believer in Post-it notes, notifications. You got to do stuff to keep you present. I love that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, Christie, who are your clients for the academy? Who's a typical client for you?
The clients typically are current upcoming leaders, managers, business owners, HR directors, I would say project managers, anybody who's leading people. They need to rally, they need to inspire. Anybody who's wanting to step into leadership, people who are struggling to find their way. I think this work is for everybody, but especially, it's designed for people who are stepping up their leadership game or wanting to grow their team. In the past, my clients been those fast growing organizations that expand and grow really quickly. And so they've got this, amazing team, but their leadership gaps are there, and they need to get people again into that we mindset, productive communication skills, teaching them how to delegate, train, develop. That is such a hard thing for people to learn to do, because the ego has to redefine success. A lot of times when we get into these successful positions, whether we're running our own business or whether we're promoted into a leadership position, if we don't redefine our success, we're still defining success when we are in our early 20s or in our teens. And that typically is titles, money, tasks, roles, responsibilities, right? And so as long as those are really busy, then we must be successful. And in reality, once I talk to a lot of people, once they get into those 30s, especially mid 30s, it's like, I'm just busy. I don't have time for my family. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. It's like, we have to redefine what success looks like today, right now.
Yeah.
People should do that every year. What's it look like? How do you transform your mindset so you can outsmart the ego when he says you have to work 12 hours a day because that defines success? No, that creates burnout. So working smart for 8 hours a day is just as successful as working 12 hours a day. I guarantee it, no questions asked. But recognizing, what needs to be taken off the plate. Tasks do not define value. If you are wrapped in your tasks, most likely your ego is telling you you're only worthwhile if you are doing tasks. Leaders are worthwhile if they're developing their people, if they're coaching, if they're training, if they're helping solve the human problems within their organization. If leaders aren't solving the human problem within their organization has a massive culture issue. I guarantee it. And the reality is most organizations' biggest struggle is the human part of their business, right? Have you ever talked to anybody and they're like, what's the toughest part of your job? My team, the people I work with, the laziness, right? Or whatever it is. And so it's like,
no one ever says my problem is the spreadsheets.
Right. They might be tired of the spreadsheet, but only because they're doing all of them because they haven't taught the people underneath them to do them.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yep. So this work is all about solving the human part of people's business.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Tell us, tell us about how are you marketing right now for your academy? How are you getting new clients in?
So this is actually, I will be completely honest, it is May 25th today. We are just getting ready to launch this product. In the past, I've been kind of the old-fashioned handshake gal, lots of live interaction. And so we're just shifting into this kind of more virtual digital platform. So we're going to start doing more podcasts. I write for Forbes, Coach Council. So getting articles out there, really just kind of trying to create that organic audience. We're starting to push some ads, but really I think it's finding those people that are just drawn to this work. One thing I've learned in my career, you can't force this work on people. People are either drawn to it or they're not. And so just getting the word out, telling people about it. If you know a company that's fast growing, if you know someone that's struggling to step into their leadership, or someone who's ambitious and they want to step into their leadership, this program is right for them. And it's so transformational. It's also really, really good for people who are, mid-career. They're growing in their titles. They've got kids at home. They've got spouses at home, and they're just getting worn out and burnout. Relationships are struggling. There is an ego that's driving them. Again, it goes back to that redefining the balance. How do they get to create balance and stop that burnout and stop the sabotage that's chasing ghosts to say, you've got to prove yourself still. You got to prove yourself. I hear that all the time. Well, as soon as I get to this, the ego never lets you get to this. There's always another this. And so recognizing when is good enough, so you get to just be happy and you get to celebrate your current success, and you can continue to grow and be better. But today you get to be happy and you get to be fulfilled and you get to truly connect with the people in your life, because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. Neither are the people you love. And so making sure there's balance in all of it.
I love that. I also am a big fan of I call it stacking my wins, and I've got a stack of Post-its maybe this tall.
Yes.
Old wins that I keep in my desk over there.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that idea.
I think that's it's important for me at least, because it helps me, recognize my wins basically. Have you considered like partnerships?
What? I want partnerships. Anybody out there who wants to partner, please call me. So the ultimate goal for this, I'm hoping this program takes off. My goal is to have coaches learn the model and be able to distribute it and use it within their own businesses. That's ultimate goal. This time next year, I'm hoping that that's what this looks like. So having a certification program. The other thing is I would love to have just business partners that, or affiliate partners that we just complement each other's work. Like I said, this work complements every program out there. So if you are finding, that your clients are struggling or you've hit these roadblocks, most likely there's an ego involved, and we've got to clear their mindset and shift it so they can do the work that you're trying to get them to do. And so the, more you can help people hone in on that ego quickly, the easier it is to transform their behaviors. And what I love about this work the most is people start to shift within 3 to 4 weeks of doing the work. That's the coolest part. It doesn't take a long time. It just takes conscious effort. So absolutely. Partnerships sound great. I'm all in.
Awesome. Well, Christie, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're coming up on the end of the hour here. But is there somewhere online where people can connect with you or learn more about the Mindful Choice Leadership Academy?
Absolutely. They can go to my website, mindfulchoicecoaching.com. That'll probably be the easiest way to look us up. There's a fun way to learn about the egos on there, and then be able to schedule a call or follow our webinar that gives you even more deeper information into the egos as well to see if it's a good fit for you.
Awesome. Christie Garcia, thank you so much for joining us on the Remarkable Coach podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Take care.